calls me, sir, there is an author. His book is kept on the back. He's getting a bit angry. He wants to talk to you. He wants to get his books kept in the front. And sir, he also wants to talk to you. And there I was with my first interaction with Amish and the very short conversation, saying and pushing me, just get my books displayed in the front. It will sell more. You will make more money. And obviously, we need your help to promote a new author. So that's, guys, Amish for you. Amish, your first book, The Immortals of Melua, was rejected by 20 publishers before you kind of self-published it, and yet it went to become a bestseller within the first month of sale. To what do you owe your persistence and success?
I guess I was just lucky to be in the right place at the right time, yeah. I think when my first book was released, Immortals of Melua, this is 2010, there was, I think, and most of my readers are youngsters, and my book, you're right, was rejected by every publisher it was sent to, and the reason given to me was apparently the youth would not be interested in such a subject, because it was apparently it's a religious subject. The youth were apparently interested in campus romance novels. The book was too long, I was told. It was some 400, 500 pages. I was also told there were these Gyan sessions every few chapters, and apparently the youth don't like that. And ironically, most of my readers are actually the youth. So I think maybe it was conventional wisdom that such a book would not work earlier, but it ended up actually working well beyond my dreams, yeah.
Going back to that period of around 2008 to 2010, as a bookseller, either we had fiction or we had non-fiction as a category. There was nothing called mythological fiction. So did you decide to write on mythology and weave a story around your religious beliefs? You had this story in your mind? Or perhaps because of the outstanding success of the Da Vinci series at that point of time?
Okay, let's turn this question to them actually. How many of you guys read mythology now? It could be my books, could be anyone else's books. Most of them. Are they mostly my books? If it's not, shame on you guys. Okay. But, okay, tell me this. Before 2010, did you guys know the Ramayana and the Mahabharata? Yeah? Anyone who says I had absolutely no idea about Ramayana and Mahabharata before 2010. You may not have read it, but did you know about it? Yeah? Almost everyone knew about it. Yeah, there's this line I'd heard beautifully once, a wonderful line, that no Indian hears the Ramayana for the first time. We're all born with it. It's the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and our culture indeed is actually the oldest surviving culture in the world. We're the only pre-Bronze Age culture that is still alive. So actually the demand was always there. The demand has been there for 7,000, 8,000 years. I think maybe it wasn't being supplied perhaps through English language publishing in India, which is why you didn't see those books.
It was a huge
but
risk.
The demand was always there.
But it was a huge risk you took, going out of the normal to write it.
यार देखो ऐसा है कि risk is something you see only in hindsight. Courage and stupidity are two sides of the same coin.
Your portrayal of Shiva, more as an ordinary human with flesh and blood like most of us, rather than a superhuman or God, what thought or rationale went behind it to portray Shiva as a normal human being?
I'd love to say it was my idea and I'm this brilliant creative guy, but the reality is the concept of seeing the divine in human beings, again, has been around in India for thousands of years. Again, pop quiz once again. Who's the greatest Sanskrit playwright that you guys have heard of? Anyone wants to take a guess? Kalidas? Kalidas? Most people agree Kalidas was perhaps the greatest Sanskrit playwright. Who did Kalidas think was the greatest Sanskrit playwright? There are plays of his, Malavikagnimitram, etc., where the heroine is Malvika. I don't know if Malvika is here. Yeah, Kalidas had named a character after you apparently, or vice versa. So there are plays like that where Kalidas acknowledges that the greatest Sanskrit playwright ever was this guy called Bhasa. Okay, and I am only a humble follower of that great man. This man called Bhasa. You have to read the plays of Bhasa. Okay, just check them out. his thing, he largely wrote only on the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Anyone has read Bhasa? Applause for her. I'm so delighted. It's so sad. Most times I go to India, people haven't even heard of Bhasa. If I ask an Indian audiences, the greatest Sanskrit playwright ever. He used to write short plays. Okay, so now Bhasa, he used to write plays, short plays, inspired by the Ramayana and Mahabharata. And his entire approach was this actually, that he would see it from a plausible perspective. No magic realism or anything like that, right? And his plays were actually among the greatest ever. This tradition has been around for a long time.
You know, it's actually more than a decade. Times have changed, people habits have changed. You are also more sure of your audience today, you know, that you were 10 years back. You have to rewrite these books today. What would you have done differently or better?
Nothing.
Nothing.
I may have done other things differently. Maybe the marketing, maybe the contracts, anything else. But writing, I think you just have to let the heart flow. And that's how I write now as well. I just let the heart flow.
The narration tone or something would have changed given the younger audiences today?
No, I'll write the way it appears natural to me, you know. I'm not going to write LOL. It's not natural to me. But I wrote what appeared modern to me in 2010 because I was that. So I write in the language that comes naturally to me. Yeah.
You know, something you wrote in one of your earlier books, I don't remember which one was it, the Milwa or the Nagas. There is, and I quote, there is my truth and there is your truth, there is no universal truth. You know, that's something that really stayed with me even in times of stress or in times of an argument with friends. Would you want to elaborate in the context of our beliefs, mythology and a value system, this line, there is my truth and there is your truth, there is no universal truth?
Actually, this is an Indian concept. Our oldest scripture is, everyone I'm sure knows. I'll ask the kid, which is our oldest scripture? Rig Veda. Applause for the kid here. What's your name, beta? Huh? Deepshiku. Okay. Applause for Deepshiku. He's right. Rig Veda. The Rig Veda has this lovely line in the Asya Vamasya hymn that Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. That truth is one, but the wise speak it as many. So this is a tradition in India at least for, again, many thousands of years, and which to me is the bedrock of genuine liberalism. Because genuine liberalism is essentially where you respect multiple points of view. I might disagree with your point of view, but I'll not say that you're evil. You have a right to your point of view. I have a right to my point of view, which is what actually the Vedas say. So it's actually inspired from there.
Of the Indian Trinity, Shiva and Vishnu have always been heroes. You've also chosen them over Brahma. Going back in mythology, any particular reason why Brahma is the most neglected of the trio?
There is, yeah. I'm sure people must have read this in Amarjita Katha comics at least, if not in the Brahma Puran or the Padma Puran. The story is this. Apparently, at the very close to creation, a pillar of flames, a pillar of light appeared. And Lord Vishnu and Lord Brahma had a competition that who could reach the end of this pillar of light. That pillar obviously represented Lord Shiva. And so this story is told in various different ways in the Puranas. One of the stories goes that Lord Vishnu took the Varaha form and dug downwards, and Lord Brahma became a bird and flew upwards, and they couldn't reach the end of it. And Lord Vishnu came back and told the truth, that I couldn't reach the end of the pillar of light. I don't know where it ends. Lord Brahma came back and he lied. He said, no, I did reach the end, and the witness that I reached the end is this flower called the Ketaki flower. So then obviously from that pillar, Lord Shiva appeared. He told Lord Brahma, you're lying, and your punishment for lying is that no one will worship you outside of Pushkar. So yeah, jhoot bole kawa kaate types.
I think you've been saying that, very shortly that you'll write on Mahabharata. How much of the series on Mahabharata would be based on Draupadi? Would Draupadi be the focal point, or would it?
Yeah, I mean, my Mahabharat will be quite different. But she is central to the story even in the traditional way. Uh, and in the traditional Ved Vyasa's Mahabharat, all the women characters are all very strong, not just Draupadi. Even Shakuntala, all of them, they're all very, very strong. Don't go by what you saw in the television serials. The original texts were a little different. So yeah, she will be central in my, she'll be important in my Mahabharata as well, as she was in the original Mahabharata.
Let's talk about fears. Each one inside us has fears, deep fears. What were your fears as a first-time author versus the fears you have today as an accomplished author?
Fear as a first-time author was actually there was genuinely no fear because I wasn't thinking anything. I was just shocked that I'd actually written an entire book. Everyone around me was shocked that I'd actually written a book. So all I wanted to do was get it published to the best that I could do to promote it. That's all that I was thinking. The fear that I would have today is, I think, the fear any fiction author would have. Because any fiction author who says that it's all my brilliance, my creativity, I think he or she is lying. Because none of us can truly explain where it comes from. Non-fiction I can understand. Non-fiction is a set of thoughts, a hypothesis you're putting up and you're building the case for it. But fiction is a story. It's like composing music. Where does it come from? If you're a believer like me, you'll say it's a blessing from Lord Shiva. If you're a non-believer, you'll say it's a universe blessing you or something. But it never is your own creativity. So my biggest fear now is, what if this blessing stops? Till now, fortunately, it has not stopped. But what if this blessing stops? Then I'll have to be a full-time bureaucrat, which is quite terrible.
You're already on the path. When we met 7-8 years ago, you said, Sidharth, the movie is just about to come in. We've been hearing about the movie on the Shiva Trilogy for real some time. Can you what's happening?
Yeah, you're right, because the rights had been contracted by Karan Johar. It didn't come to fruition. So I got the rights back. We're still friends, Karan and I. And we've just announced a new deal, actually. There's this guy called Roy Price, who's the former head of Amazon Global, one of the top 100 most powerful people in Hollywood. He started his own company.
Okay.
So he and Shekhar Kapoor, who's an Oscar-winning film director, I'm sure all of you have heard of, an Indian Oscar-winning film director, and Suparn Verma, who has... Anyone has seen Family Man on Amazon? Oh, quite a few. Okay. So Suparn is the guy who's written and directed Family Man.
Okay.
So essentially a contract has been signed. Roy Price is producing it. Shekhar Kapoor is supervising it, and Suparn Verma is writing it.
So what should we expect, a movie or a web series?
Series. It's a series.
Great. Amish, another phrase, which you wrote, I think it was the Nagas. The opposite of love is not hate. Hate is just love gone bad. The actual opposite of love is apathy. Some of your phrases, have a lot of depth and meaning. To what do we owe this? Is it some of your inner grief, experiences, or pain, or reflections?
All of us will go through our ups and downs in life. That's a part of life. I've had a difficult 5-6 years. It's one of the reasons I've...
But this was written
much
back
before.
At least a decade ago, I believe.
But I saw the meaning of this only actually deeper in the last few years, actually, which is why I mentioned this. The philosophy itself, again, is actually from Lord Shiva's story. I'm sure everyone knows the Indian equivalent of Cupid, the Indian god of love, is Kamdev, right? Everyone knows that. And I'm sure everyone knows the story that Kamdev was destroyed by Lord Shiva when he opened his third eye. There's a long story behind it, but net, that story is actually symbolic. Kamdev represented love, And Lord Shiva was meditating at that point of time, so he represented detachment. And it was only detachment that could destroy love. That's the philosophy. So that's what I wrote down actually in there. But if I think through it, over the last few years, you see that between individuals, you see that between societies, you see that between countries. If you hate someone, then you still have a relationship with that person. And hatred is often love just gone bad. You know you've truly moved on from a relationship when that relationship doesn't impact you anymore. Then love is finished. It's like even at a country level, you know. I have met many more Pakistanis, for example, in London than I've ever met in India. And I find that they, at least within the first 5 minutes, they'll start talking about India, you know. Either excessive love for India or excessive hatred for India. But you'll find that most Indians, we don't really speak that much about Pakistan, frankly, anymore. We'll speak more about China, you know. Even our cricket matches, we'll think of, you know, England or Australia. It's not really top of mind in our mind.
Cricket matches are, I think, the...
Even cricket matches, let's be honest, I will stop my day for an India-England match. Because that is a play for the best match. Pakistan is really not in that league anymore. So in some ways, are Indians actually moving on? And is Pakistan still stuck? Because if there's hatred, there's still a hope for a relationship. So I think there was a lot of depth in that philosophy of Lord Shiva. I have realized it maybe a few years after writing it.
So Amish, compared to a normal fiction writer, you know, where you just weave stories around and you bring in characters, you know, your books have a lot of depth, a lot of knowledge, a lot of background of history and mythology. So where did you get it? Was it your childhood or what impacted this learning?
I basically obsessively track the only source of knowledge in the entire world and particularly in India, which is this website called Twitter. I'm joking. I mean, obviously. Yeah. Obviously, I'm joking. Yeah, no. And if you want to remain sane, stay away from Twitter. I don't know if anyone is broadcasting that right now. But look, I read a lot, and I would suggest that to everyone. I read at least 5-6 books a month, and I've been reading at that pace for decades. And to all the parents who want their children to read, I would suggest children don't do what you tell them to do. Children do what they see you doing. So if you want your children to read, you should read first. If the children see you doing, like my son, he reads a lot. He reads even more than I do. But it's because my ex-wife, both of us also read a hell of a lot. So my son also, he's used to it, so he also reads a hell of a lot. So reading is one of the best ways to gather knowledge. It could go into a book like Sidharth suggested that I did with my books. But even if it doesn't go into a book, it makes your life richer. So read. Particularly, you can start with my books, but expand beyond that.
Amish, on the personal side, you know, the journey from a banker to an author to now a diplomat. While being a banker, you know, decided to write your first books on mythological fiction, then you became a full-time author. You also wrote non-fiction, and now you're a diplomat, you know. How have these events in life impacted your writing style, or what are you gonna, writing next?
Yeah, I mean, I've lived 3 careers, 3 lives in basically a little more than a decade. Yeah, I think I've enjoyed these experiences, and each experience makes you richer. I have a story idea now. Once I finish the Ramchandra series, I'll probably take that up. It's set in London. It's got time travel in there and gaming. And bases a lot that I've picked up in London, actually. And again, one of the things I believe in is engage with different people. People from different backgrounds, different cultures. It makes you, whether you agree or disagree with them, that doesn't matter. It makes you richer, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And London is a wonderful place to do that. You get almost every nationality out there.
earlier the difference between, whether to buy a book or a movie was the time you actually spent, enjoying it or reading it. Now with OTT, big budget productions, top level starcast, these are these 10, 12 episodes, web series, content which is now releasing. That too in regional languages, which was not the case earlier. They can also have a similar depth like a book. And in fact, Salman Rushdie recently commented, that these serials with complex storyline and well-etched characters are the new literary fiction. What is your view? Do you see another threat to books, because of these long, long web series?
Good question. It could be a threat to books, yes. But it's certainly not a threat to storytelling. Remember when books emerged, excuse me, I'm not talking about handwritten manuscripts, because obviously you couldn't publish that many books, at that time. In 1400 in Europe, there were 15 books published in that year. I'm not quoting it randomly. I just read it. I just read it in Niall Ferguson's book, The Tower and the Square. So in 1400, just 15 books were published. By 1500 in Europe, 1,500 books were published in that year. And the difference was the Gutenberg press, which allowed books to be printed much more easily, distributed much more easily. Before that, stories weren't communicated through books. They were communicated through bards, through singers,
Jatras, plays.
And through plays, right? It wasn't communicated through books. So did the books end the verbal storytelling, the Kathakar, Sutradhar thing? Perhaps, yes. But stories didn't die, right?
Okay.
So could books be under threat? Possibly. But will storytelling be under threat? No, certainly not. It's just moving to a different medium. What you'll find is actually many storytellers will explore both. So I'm working on a OTT, original series as well.
Achha.
Developing it. So let's see where life takes me. But essentially, stories will continue. The medium may change. Stories will never end. We are the stories that we tell. Muriel Rickenson said that the universe is not made up of atoms, it's made up of stories. And I agree with her, man.
That's why we renamed the bookstore as Story. With this, guys, we like to open up to the audience for questions. I'm sure you will have a lot of questions to ask Amish. Sure, there's a lady.
You are often regarded as the Tolkien of India, but I find, this is my personal evaluation, I find there's a difference between how Tolkien reimagined the mythological universe of his and how you reimagined the Shiva or the Sita, the Ramayana or the Shiva mythological world in your own terms. So the difference that I found was you tried to rationalize through the mythology that was already a part of the Indian culture, whereas Tolkien did not. He created his own thing. So my question is, what inspired you to, rationalize the myths and not just leave it be as a mythology or, creating your own mythological world, but you try to, rationalize or scientifically explain the myths. So what made you do that? That is my question.
Yeah, good question. And the answer to your question is in the word mythology itself. The root of the word mythology is a Greek word called mythos. And today's dictionary tells us that mythology is a fanciful story which may have had some kernels of truth sometime, okay? But it's been forgotten. And history is fact. That's what we are told, right? But that's not the way it was shown in ancient times. The difference between history and mythos was that history did not necessarily have philosophy at the heart of it. Mythos meant a story that hides the philosophical truth. from our traditions. Our traditions is like a matrix of, we're not just a tradition of one book, we're a tradition of an entire library, right? And the philosophy that appeals to me the most is the one that there is divine in every single one of us. Not that there is one God who'll sit up there and judge us, some guy with a long flowing white beard who'll judge people, you'll go to heaven, you'll go to hell, and you'll burn in hell for eternity. Frankly, I don't find that inspiring. I respect those who may find it inspiring, but I don't, right? The version that I find inspiring is that there is divinity in every single one of us. Not just human beings, but in everything, right? Which is why we worship nature as well. Which is why we do goddess worship as well. Which is why we are okay with atheism as well. Because it's cool if you don't see the divinity. I find this very inspiring. And this essentially comes from a plausible approach to philosophy. Since I find it inspiring, I guess that's at the heart of the stories I try and write.
Sure, there's a lady there.
Whoever has the mic.
There.
Okay. If you can, sorry, what's your name? The orange shirt. What's your name? Manish. Okay, Manish is the most powerful guy in the hall right now. Anyone wants to ask a question, just attract his attention. Or the suited man back there. Okay.
I think the lady
Okay,
there
sorry, go ahead. Ask your question.
She wanted to ask.
Go ahead. Yeah. You have the mic, right? Ask.
No.
Oh, okay.
Hello, sir. Firstly, I'm a huge fan of yours.
Thank you.
And I'd like to ask, how do you get to give so much different direction and taste to your writings where the characters are already existent for such a long time?
The characters have
Very good question. Again, the answer in this is I wish I could say that I'm this brilliant guy who creates the characters by myself, but that'll sound very nice and sexy, but it's not true. Because actually, I genuinely write my stories like a witness. Which is why I was explaining earlier, my biggest fear is I don't know when the blessing will stop. So I just open the laptop and this parallel universe opens up. And I just record what I see. And to me, in many ways, that parallel universe is more real than our world. I can't hear your thoughts at this point of time. But that parallel universe, I can hear the thoughts of people. I don't only just see them. I can hear them, I can hear their thoughts, I can feel their emotions, and then I record what I see. So I actually just follow the characters. I don't create it. I just follow the characters. It's Lord Shiva's blessings.
You wanted to ask?
Sir, my question was that in Indian culture, the people used to worship nature, and after that, the trinity of the god arrives, the Lord Shiva, Vishnu, and Lord Brahma. Do you think in today's world, the people need to return to worshipping the nature, be it Surya Dev, Agni Dev, Varun Dev, to give the importance to the protecting water, protecting air, giving the importance to the environment? Should we return to that old culture of worshipping the nature, saving the nature from the prism of religion, because people are very sensible toward the religion, and looking into the protecting the environment through the prism of religion, is it a good idea? And my second question is, what do you think about the Kalki avatar, the 10th avatar of Vishnu?
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Look, firstly, on nature worship, it is still a part of our traditions. Actually, I'm in West Bengal. This is the heart of the mother goddess worship form, and nature worship is essentially mother goddess worship. It's a part of it, and you'll notice even in the Trinity that you've spoken of, Lord Vishnu or Lord Shiva. Lord Vishnu's Varaha avatar is essentially a worship of nature, right? His story, when he protects and fights for Mother Earth. And even Lord Shiva, in various forms of Parvati Ma, which are actually close to nature. So this tradition has always been there in India. It's always a very, very key part, particularly to the goddess form. And you'll notice that goddess is worshipped not just by the Shaktas, the ones who worship Shakti Ma, but in the Vaishnavas and Shaivites, because Lord Vishnu and Lord Shiva also, we all know the story of Kali, of all of them, that they looked up to and respected goddess worship. So that brings nature worship in. And I'm living in London, I can tell you right now, the environmental movement if people aren't basically committed to it, it's a very difficult sell. In the West, for example, they have a lot more money. They can spend money on the environment if they want to. They still haven't been able to implement a proper carbon tax. They still, and many of them, they will talk a good game, but at the end of the day, they'll still import gas from Russia and oil from Russia for their heating, right? They'll talk a lot. You know, the only country which met its Paris, the only country among the G20 which met its Paris goals was India, right? We're the only ones, huh? Not US, not UK, not Germany. Everyone who talks a very good environmental game, none of them reached it. India reached it. Why is selling environmentalism such an easy task in India? You'll notice national governments, state governments, all of them can sell environment. We, in effect, actually have a carbon tax. Over the last 10 years, India and China have reforested at the fastest pace, more than, again, many developed countries as well. Why is it an easy sell out here? I suspect it's because for many Indians, the fact that we see nature as a goddess to be worshipped rather than a resource to be used makes it actually a political issue that does not attract controversy. In the West, environmentalism actually attracts controversy. You'll be shocked to know that. It actually attracts controversy. In India, not really. So perhaps there is a logic to seeing some divinity in nature. It helps.
Sure. Can we have a mic here, Manish? The lady here.
Kalki Avatar. Kalki Avatar, we should just wait.
Sure, please.
Hi, Amish.
Hi.
Your initial start as an author similar to J.K. Rowling, rejected by so many publishers, and then you started by yourself. Is there any similarity between Harry Potter, the series, and Shiva Trilogy, other than the fact they're both outsiders who became heroes? In retrospect, do you have any similarities?
He stopped at 3, she continued till 7 or 8.
Sorry, what?
I'm saying he stopped at 3 at the trilogy, she continued till 7 or 8.
No.
Hypothetical.
When you spoke about J.K. Rowling, I have to say I love her books, but in the UK, sadly, well, I mean, many political issues have become very heated in the UK and in the West. So there are people who attach a lot of controversy to her. So I thought you were thinking I'm getting into controversy. I'm like, yeah, kya bol rahe ho? So yeah, look, the thing is Harry Potter an outsider hero? Outsider, yes. Is Lord Shiva also? Of course, yes. Not just in my books, even traditionally. But I think that's where the similarities end. They're very different in many ways. Lord Shiva, I think what truly makes him so attractive is, for many of us, is he's the Lord of contradictions, right? I think perhaps that's the reason why many youth also find him attractive today, because he's the Lord of dance, he's the Lord of the arts, right? But he also hangs around at a cremation ghat, puts ash on himself. He's the originator of the Vedas, right? The font of knowledge. But among his closest friends are the most uncouth of people, ghosts, ghouls. In Varanasi, in Banaras, where my father's family is from, there's a line ki jiska koi nahi uska Bhagwan Shiv hai. That those who are completely rejected by society, Lord Shiva is there for us, right? He's the Adi Yogi, he's the originator of yoga. So therefore, the font of good health, good practice, good living. But we all know, I'm not suggesting you guys should do it, but he does drink bhang and,
Swallowed poison.
Yeah, he swallowed poison. So he's the Lord of contradictions. I think that's what makes him so attractive. And I guess he had the strength and power to manage these contradictions, which is what I guess was different. Because Harry Potter is essentially one character. Lord Shiva is so many, yeah. And yes, and he's a god.
And he's a while we take that question, Amish, ki, as a champion of mythology, you know, as somebody who really believes in, you know, writes about mythology, you feel ki mythology should be taught in more detail while we are young at school?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. 100%. It should be taught in our schools.
But I think
It should be.
lot
Look,
of
you
that
know,
you're saying the Vedas and the Puranas.
one
and
of-
the,
I've said
hardly
this-
See, you know, hardly in cities in schools.
I've said this repeatedly. One of the misfortunes of India is that many modern liberals don't realize, modern Indian liberals don't realize, our ancient culture is actually their biggest ally. They don't realize this. Because our ancient books, I'm not talking about the books that were written in the medieval era, I'm talking about ancient books, are deeply liberal. And if you want to build a liberal society, the best thing you can do is make them read our ancient books. Like I'll give you an example. There's, you know, you can either fight for, say, the cause of transgenders by quoting an American or a British guy, to which most Indians will react, what does that have to do with me? Or you can quote Lord Ram from the Rama and Purush Napunsak Nari Vajiv Charachar Koi. Lord Ram himself said, men, women, and transgenders, he specifically mentions Napunsak, that you give up deceit, you love each other, come to me, you're my people. So imagine if you fight for transgender rights by quoting Lord Ram rather than an American or a British guy. The chances of success are much higher. So I strongly feel we should teach our ancient texts in our schools and colleges.
The lady there wanted to.
Hi, sir.
Right?
I wanted to understand one thing. You've primarily written about mythological texts and most of the Indian mythological series there are. Do you plan on divulging from that area and entering into a new fictional or non-fictional area? And if yes, then how do you think your current audience would react to that?
Yes, actually, I am planning that. And because I am planning that once I finish the Ramchandra series, I'm thinking that I'm going to take up a series based in London, which is going to be set in the modern day, which has gaming and time travel in it. So it's a very, very different genre. I hope the audience, my readers like it. Otherwise, I'll have to go back to banking or, you know, do some other jobs. Bureaucracy job doesn't pay that well. So, but I am planning to write that too. A non-fiction as well. And I've written non-fiction. You know, I recently released a book called Dharma. It's a non-fiction book looking at our ancient texts and you know, and interpreting it and trying to draw lessons from it. But I have a non-fiction idea based in my mind on the West. I think the West has lost many of the things that have made them successful. And they are, in a way, in a beginning of their decline. And I believe on a long term, India is actually rising. We'll have blips up and down, but I think long term we are rising. So I want to write a book on what we can learn from the decline of the West and what India should do to ensure that we don't repeat those mistakes.
Guys, we have time for one last question for somebody who hasn't yet asked a question. I haven't asked? Sure. The lady here.
Good evening, sir. First of all, you're a huge fan.
Thank you.
I want to ask that when you started writing, why Shiva only? Like, is it the influence of your ancestral house, as you mentioned in Varanasi? Why not any other god?
No, and I've written on the Ramayana too. But yes,
Why
yes.
first Shiva?
But yeah, look, I come from a Shaivite family. By family, we are Lord Shiva worshippers. But, you know, in the Indian way, sit, please. So, being a particular follower in one family doesn't mean that you cannot worship other gods. So, my mother is actually a Shakta. She's a goddess worshipper. My father used to worship the Nirgun Nirakar. We lost him last year, but he used to worship Nirgun Nirakar. My elder sister worships Lord Shiva. My elder brother, Lord Ram. My bhabi, Shakta. My twin brother, Lord Krishna. So we are kind of all over. Me specifically, why Lord Shiva? I no disrespect to any other god, but he's the coolest god there is, yeah. You know, so as one of my younger readers said, he's the dude of the gods. So it's just wonderful spending time with him, even if it's just as a witness to his story.
We'll ask that girl at the right end at the last question. She gave me a real grim look when she didn't get the mic.
Hi, sir. So
Hi.
I wanted to ask this question. You just said a few moments back that you are guided by a parallel world when you're writing. So, like, when you close the laptop, do you have second thoughts on how the characters are building up?
Yeah, actually it did. It happened only with Immortals of Meluha at the beginning. Because Immortals of Meluha, sit, please. So I'd actually made a story summary. And the idea, you read those self-help books, right? You make a story summary and you expand it. So I'd actually read self-help books on how to write. Immortals of Meluha was the first piece of fiction I'd ever written. I had no idea how to write a book. So, and at that time, Lord Ganesh's character was emerging in the book in a very different way from what his character sketch was. And I was struggling with that. And I kept trying to force fit him into the original character sketch, and that wasn't working. With that book, I learned that I have to just surrender to the flow. I shouldn't question it. If this is the way it's supposed to be, this is the way it's supposed to be. And I've learned over time that it actually all ties up. So there were clues that were laid out in Secret of the Nagas or Oath of the Vayuputras that were tied up in Ravan, Enemy of Aryavarta, which released only some 2.5 years back. There's no way I could have planned all this. One of the ways, I've just learned that the instinct actually works. He is guiding it somehow. One of the ways to see the Ramchandra series is that it's a 1400-year prequel to the events of the Shiva Trilogy. So there were actually clues in there which are being tied up in the Ramchandra series. There is no way I could have planned this. There is no way. So my strategy, I just follow the way he sends it. I don't question it at all.
Amish, the last question before we end, spoke of a new job or something if this does not work out. So you've seen the journey from a banker to an author to a diplomat. Is a political inning coming soon?
No.
Guys,
No, I mean it genuinely. Politics is the toughest job there is. India is a very, very, very complicated country. I have huge respect for all our politicians. It's not easy running India. So I'm not cut out for it, no.
so guys, thank you very, very much. It's been a great session. I think Amish is here signing off books, and sorry for questions that could not be taken. Thank you, Kalam, for inviting me. It was great chatting with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, speakers, for the guests. The book signing will happen at the bookstore, not here. So yes. Thank you so much. Now we move on to our next session. I'll hand it over to Shancharidi for the next session.